after this first introduction, what you would find is that, as I said, they mention al-basmala, or in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In Arabic we have an acronym for this, we call it al-basmala. So they mention this in the very beginning, right? That they're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the all-knowing, to reveal whatever is hidden, whatever is unknown to you. And then they would mention the praise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there was this scholar, his name, maybe some of you would know him. His name is Al-Qutb al-Razi. Al-Qutb al-Razi. And he was also known as Al-Qutb al-Tahtani, because he used to attend in a certain school, and there were two Qutbs in that school. Alright? One of them used to reside in the second floor, and the other one used to reside in the bottom floor. So they called him Al-Qutb al-Tahtani. Alright? He was a famous scholar of logic and philosophy. And in one of his books he was discussing, why do Islamic texts start with praising the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Why do we start in the beginning by al-basmala and then we thank God? I forgot to mention this, subhanAllah. After you say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, you ask God's assistance and then you thank Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He has guided you for asking this assistance and for approaching this important topic or important endeavor. And then there is this praise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I know this is not the modern part, but I'll explain how this is reflected in our contemporary world. So, as I said in the beginning, that asking God's assistance by al-basmala in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then thanking God subhanahu wa ta'ala for His assistance and praising Him, and then praising the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This, understanding the wisdom in this, you would really grasp it if you understand the wisdom behind why there are prophets from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you understand why there are prophets, you understand why we would praise the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the beginning. The idea is, not all humans have this kind of potential to receive revelations from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not all of our souls are pure enough to receive the revelation. Alright? Remember, we are contingent beings. Do you understand what contingent is? In Arabic it's hadith. Alright? And contingent beings, hadith means what? You have been, at some point you were not mentioned, right? There was no هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا, right? Which in English, was there any period of time, this is the meaning of it, was there any period of time where human beings were not mentioned? There was no mention of human beings at some point. You understand? And if you go through human beings themselves, each one of us, at some point of time, you have been mentioned, you have been named, and before that, you were not even thought of. Right? Beings who are like that, beings who are contingent, like us, we have different souls, right? We have different makeup. Each individual has his own makeup. And we have been created in a way that we only grasp knowledge through sensation. Again, if you take a look at babies, they're not born with programmed understanding of concepts and categorizations or language or anything of that sort, right? They're not wired with data. Yes, perhaps you can say they're programmed with abilities and potentials that we talked about last time, that education and learning and so on this kind of potential is cultivated. But again, there's no data installed in babies when they're born, right? They only have these abilities and tools, and they grapple with realities using their senses and using their minds and brains in order to grasp concepts. They notice patterns and categories, and through trial and error and analogies, they start developing their own understanding of things, and they operate as a functional human being. Alright? But the thing is, revelation, when it comes from angels, coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, requires that the minds or the souls of the beings that receive this sort of revelation are not bound only to the senses. You understand? It's a realm above the senses. Alright, why am I saying this? If we needed prophets with certain abilities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose them in predestination to be as such, to be able to receive revelations from Him subhanahu wa ta'ala and through His angels, it's the same thing. You're asking knowledge, right? You're seeking knowledge right now. So what the Muslim scholars or what they do in these texts is that they're trying to give you sort of a hint to remember. It's the same thing. See, in Revelations, you were not able to grasp information or to grasp the revelation itself or the sacred texts unless there was a teacher, a prophet, a messenger delivering this to you. Right? You were not programmed in the very beginning knowing that there is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There had to be some sort of revelation and some sort of test. So the same thing in knowledge. Two things. One, we need the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in all kinds of knowledge. Because premise one, if we say that hidden realities or understanding the realities of this universe that are hidden requires some sort of clarity in one's vision, and this is the premise one, the first introduction, and I'm doing this kind of logical analogy, so to speak. All right. Premise number two. Only prophets have the clearest vision, so they see things revealed as they are. You understand? We as normal beings, normal humans, let's say, with limited abilities. There are other humans that have greater abilities, like the prophets. But we as human beings, we have this. We're limited, as I said, to the senses. See, let me give you an example, and I think it will illustrate things, and also take a sip. See, now I just drank this herbal tea, or herbal, I don't know, drink. Did I know every single molecule in this?
No.
No? Alright? I don't know it. But there is something. I sensed with my tongue the heat in this drink. Do I grasp the realms of heat? Do I see do I grasp it with my mind, with my intellect, every single thing about the heat? I don't. Even the cup itself. Even the cup itself. See, I understand the texture, and I see the color, it's transparent, and I can judge the measurements of this object and the weight with the drink in it and without, and so forth. All of these, I'm not understanding the matter itself. They're all judgments. See, I'm talking about the color of the cup. I'm talking about the measure of the cup. I'm talking about heat. But the reality of matters themselves, I don't know them. Same thing when children learn about, see, when they discover that fire would hurt, for example. what they would notice is just the sensory perception, the sensory understanding of how things are. And then it would take us experiments and long ages and periods of times to understand the causal nature between cause and effect. See, this whole relation of cause and effect, this is how beings like us, like humans, understand. If you take away the cause and effect, all of our scientific structure, all of our understanding of the universe is gone. You understand? So again, returning back, prophets don't require this. Things have been revealed to them. They understand things as they are without needing to know or to measure causes and effects and draw interactions and patterns between them and connections between them and so forth. So the idea is, when you praise the Prophet, what you're doing is you're also seeking his assistance in helping you. This is kind of, spiritual talk, and yes, I mean, all of the Sufis in here would understand what I'm talking about. And also all the people of the quantum, things and meta things also would understand what I'm talking about. So the idea is, you're seeking Prophet's assistance, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his assistance. And now people would ask, how would I seek his assistance? I mean, he's not here. He's not present in his physical, existence, right? And this would have a Sufi dimension. I mean, Sufis would explain this as souls or spirits, so to speak, al-arwah. They are engaged in this knowledge process. You understand? So on a spiritual level, you're asking his assistance. You understand? So this is one point. I know this is kind of a little bit, complicated. Might seem novel to you. And also putting it into simple terms may be difficult for me as well. So this is number one. Number two, which is obvious, if you're seeking the Prophet's assistance and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and if prophets in general, their primary role is to reveal the truth and deliver the message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even religion has this kind of teaching and learning sort of aspect. Alright? So you were praising the number one teacher. You understand? Because in the book you will be talking about how you're receiving knowledge from teachers or people who have been walking down through that path of this certain realm or discipline before you. Of course, you would need some kind of assistance from people who have been studying the same subject beforehand, right? This kind of using the expert knowledge, so to speak. So again, they're giving a hint that you're praising the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and at the same time, you're noticing that teachers are important in the process of education and learning and so on. All right, I think we took a little bit more time in this, and I hope it sheds some light on something. You'll find that this book, he mentioned the reason why he authored this book. So after he finished this introduction, or prayer, so to speak, he then mentioned why is he writing this book. And he talked, as you might see in the second paragraph on the first page, how he has been noticing a problem in learning with his either students or other mates, learning mates or classmates or people in the same learning environment that he is, or the academia that he is involved in. All right, the circles that he's participating in scholarship. So he has been examining this sort of suffering that they're going through. They have this, great ambitions to be, scholars and to understand things, and yet at the same time they're having trouble grasping grasping or grappling with the knowledge itself. So you have great expectations from themselves and from the knowledge that they're seeking, and yet at the same time they're having trouble grasping this knowledge and sort of going through the process step by step, you understand? So this book has been written because he has noticed a problem in education or in the process of learning. And this is something I guess human beings have been doing all along. I mean, it's quite funny, and also you would reflect on it, how whether we're talking about Islamic tradition 800 years ago or we're talking about today, we usually look for teaching people or training people how to teach or how to learn or how to study or how to develop an academic institution or the perfect learning environment or the best recommendations for achieving academic success. And all of these sort of things come up usually from problems. It's interesting how 800 years ago he tackled the notion of learning because he found this kind of problem. He has been witnessing this problem in students of his age, of his time period. So the same thing is happening today. People are talking about learning techniques and strategies because students are having trouble grasping information. There's a great problem in the teaching methodologies. For some reason, they're not. The gears are still not fit. Academic institutions, we're talking about, either people charging a whole lots of money for, failed or failing educational systems, and people with great ambitions, they're looking to be scholars, they're looking to achieve great, and yet they're having trouble. So people start talking about, all right, you know what, let's empower students with learning how to learn techniques. Same thing that we're doing here today, actually. It's interesting how history sort of repeats itself, but in different contexts. It's still being repeated. All right, people go through this suffering phase, and then something emerges from this suffering. And this also has a spiritual notion that usually through this kind of suffering, something good appears. It also tells something about our nature as beings, that we kind of have to go through this kind of effort, to exert effort or to go through some sort of hardship and difficulties in order for something good to come out in the end. After he talks about the reason why he's writing this book. So now I want you to keep that in mind. See, this is now the author is clearly stating why he's writing this book. He has been talking about problems that are apparent in his age. So we would keep that in mind, because the recommendations that he would be mentioning must solve certain problems. Even if he does not mention what these problems are, but they must solve certain problems. And it would be interesting for us, to some of you actually, if you would research into what kind of problems there were at that time. He does not mention problems, as you will see. He does not mention the problems explicitly every time. Sometimes he would, most of the time he does not say what is the problem that students were actually suffering from. And yet he gives recommendations. And it's for us to think, all right, to try to contextualize these recommendations were given to what kind of student. What was the problem that that student was going through? You understand? And then we can do analogies. Because things were given for students 800 years ago. Things have been different. But yet, this concept of contextualizing his recommendations is very important. And then he lays out like a sort of table of contents in the very beginning, and he does this in a very interesting way, because in modern times, Arabic books, they would usually mention the table of contents in the back, right? And we call it index. Yeah, index is something different. Index is usually all of the main or most frequent words and which pages they have been mentioned on and so forth.
Yes.
But the table of contents is actually what? The names, or the titles of the chapters or the units that are mentioned in a book. And we usually find this in books, in Arabic prints. Go to any library and look for the table of contents. You know, when one publisher decides to put the table of contents in the beginning, what happens? We get perplexed, we get confused. We turn the end of the book and we only find the last page and the index, and we're like, where's the table of contents? Well, of course it's not in the middle. So I mean, if you can't find it in the back, perhaps look for it in the front.
And you don't include the index. It's not in all of the Arabic books. I have never seen an index for the books.
Well, I mean, some books do include it, but generally speaking, yes, you're right. This sort of indexing is not overwhelmingly present in the Arabic publishing. So the idea is, he's doing kind of, again, 800 years ago, Az-Zarnuji is doing the same thing that is being done in contemporary times. And actually, this is not only in the contemporary times. If you take a look at certain manuscripts of the Organon of Aristotle, Aristotle's book, you would find that Aristotle used to present this kind of outline for his philosophies or logic or whatever realm of study he's writing in. He would mention the outline of the subjects that he's writing in the beginning, not in the end. See, these sort of outlines, this table of content, later on in the Islamic tradition, they turn to be the texts themselves. You understand? So one would take this table of content and then start writing, underneath, let's say, the first chapter on the nature and merit of knowledge and learning. He would read that chapter, summarize that chapter in 5-6 sentences, like a paragraph, and write them down under this title. And then we'll go on the second title, and so on. And then you would find this very 5 to 10 pages book, summarizing everything. Alright? So even these sort of texts that were used as manuals in the Muslim tradition, later on, they emerged as summaries for table of contents of earlier books. You understand? So if one would need to write a manual after the Zarnuji, an even concise one, a more summarized, abridged version of his book, he would go automatically to the very beginning, take the table of contents, read unit by unit, summarize it, abridge it in a very, consolidated form, write it underneath the title, and there you go, you got a book. You understand? And this was one of the methods that students back then used to study. To summarize, or to paraphrase, or to put things in your own terms and organization and so on.
Still going on.
Yes, very true, very true.
I'm doing this right now.
Right, very good. You wanted to say something earlier.
Oh, no, I think
all right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So he lays out this kind of outline. Before this, though, there's this statement I think it's very important for us to read. He says, before the outline, in the very paragraph before that, he says, everyone who misses his way goes astray and does not reach the goal, regardless of whether it is modest or glorious. You might think everyone who misses his way goes astray. It's the same thing, right? If I missed my way, I would go astray, right? And then the second part would explain it, and does not reach the goal regardless of whether it is modest or glorious. See, he could have mentioned only anyone who misses his way does not reach his target. Done. But he says everyone who misses his way goes astray. Being astray means what? Unguided, doing the wrong thing, walking the wrong path. Right? And when you miss your path, do you miss it while walking or by standing? If you don't, let's say I need to walk that way. all right, straight ahead to the stairs, all right. I would only miss this path if I walk through another one,
Yeah.
right? And if my goal is to reach the stairs and I'm going through another one, what am I doing? I'm doing something wrong, right? It's not the right thing to do. So what he's trying to stress, that if you miss your way, you're losing. All right, this kind of effort that you're putting to reach your goal is not something that you would be able to recover. It is being consumed. I mean,
it's painful. Your energy is consumed, your time, and you're distracted, and you're frustrated because you don't get a result. This is actually why we're here.
Or if you, this is one case. The other case is you might even not see that you're going astray. That's another point. Many of us, I mean, we try this with driving. You're trying to reach somewhere, and then you round up in a total different place, right? Let's say you're trying to come to Al-Madiafa, and then you round up going to Tahrir Square or something, right? I can't imagine that happening, but let's say that happens. All right? Yes, go ahead.
What do you mean by unrecovered? As some people maybe lost their way in the beginning, and they discovered that this is the wrong way, and we need to recover, or we need to change this way. This is not working. So, what do you mean by unrecovered?
Yeah, you cannot recover it in the sense that time has passed. I mean, if you are 10 years old, if you 20 years old, all right, and it takes you 2 more years to achieve whatever, and you go through a path that does not lead to your goals and ambitions, so you round up in a total different place, and then you'll have 2 choices: either to stick to whatever you rounded up with, or going back. And going back, that requires time and effort again. The point is, you cannot raise the past from the dead. It's gone. You understand? And this is why he's mentioning this. That if you miss your way in the very beginning, any kind of distraction or being 1 millimeter, 1 inch away from your path. I mean, see, this kind of deviation in the beginning, where do you round up in the end? There. See? So if you miss your way here, you round up there. You understand? It just takes you 1 kind of millimeter of a difference, 1 degree of an angle. Yes?
I kind of disagree, as it would be never late to change something that you have discovered wrong and change your way. It would never be late. As I don't know how I'm gonna explain that, but there is someone has told I think 99%, and he was sure that he's in Bible, or he's in a very tight situation as his relation with Allah, and at the end or before his death, he decided to change that. He decided to change his way. And he killed 99 souls. So it would never be late. If he didn't decide that, even if it's so late, he wouldn't be in heaven right now.
Very true. But again, I mean, let's take this example. Does this example discuss the going astray part, or does it discuss if you go astray, you can still come back? I mean, the 99 people have been killed.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the families of the 99 people, I mean, how you gonna treat that? I mean, can you bring the people back again? I'm not saying about God, I'm not talking about Allah's forgiveness, subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is something else. But what I'm saying is, the damage, the collateral damage, the ramifications of going in the wrong directions, they're still there. The point is, you still have a choice to return back.
But you lost a lot.
Exactly. I mean, 1 second. The clear example for this, if I went to a train station, all right, I'm supposed to be there at 7 to catch my train, and I go there at 7:15, and I miss my train. My train's missed. It's not late. I can still buy another ticket and take the train at 8. Yes. This is what you're talking about, and I agree with you. But I missed the train at 7. Done. ended.
So it's all about time and steps and effort.
What he's really trying to mention here is that you must have a solid foundation of whatever you're doing. Don't walk in the path unless you know what you're really walking into. So you would not round up in a place totally different from what you expected. This is what he's mentioning. Yes.
Okay, I have a question about knowledge, and it's a problem that I'm facing, about the people who want to have multi-things. Like multi topics to study, multi-path. I know that you have to have one path, but you still get curious about different things. And people who are studying, or Muslim scholars who are studying different areas of knowledge. So you get distracted. You want to do this and that, but you still need to be solid. So I don't know. I keep stopping myself. Like every day, I tell myself, like half of the day, just focus. You need to work on yourself on one thing, but still everything else is amazing, and I still can do them. So I don't know, when we cover this part during this, when we have the focus, when we cover the area of having your attention, especially when you're really good at all of them. So,
well, see, he's not talking about the path in the sense of only studying one thing or another. What he's really talking about is whatever you do it the right way. So, for example, if you will study more than one discipline at the same time, like many of us in college did, you take multiple courses with different subjects from different areas of knowledge, different sciences. So the idea is not to study in a linear way. This is not what he's saying. He's just saying that whatever you choose as a goal, you must have the right recipe to attain that goal. This is what he's talking about. All right? So I usually give examples with, cooking and things like that. People from Mishka would remember this whole cooking examples. If you're trying to, bake a cake, for example, and you would put more milk than necessary, or less flour, or more flour than necessary, and you start baking it and putting it in the oven. See, what is done is done. You cannot get back the cake again, unfortunately.
Especially for bakery, what's done is done.
See, that this is what he's talking about. The period of preparation. This is the gist of his word. The period of preparation is crucially important. Many of us usually like to skip introductions. This is just an introduction. Introductions are full of foundations. The correct starting points, the cornerstones, the basics, the very first layers that you would add to. If you miss the introduction, you would find yourself in the end lost. And this happened to some of us even at schools. When you miss the first couple of weeks and you miss all the introductions, and you usually find the teachers during the introductions, they're repeating over and over again. And sometimes you go like, why is he repeating these introductions? They're very simple. I understand it. And we kind of overlook these introductions, and then we round up, in the end, coming after 2 or 3 months, lost. Have you ever experienced this?
Yeah.
In the beginning, you don't pay attention. In the beginning of the school year or the academic year, you don't pay attention. Just introductions. The terminology is in the beginning. I know sometimes the problem is in the professors and teachers. I do understand that. But the point is, you don't enter the school year with that kind of mindset. Let's have a solid foundation in the beginning. You don't do that. There are all introductions that I can read up quickly, that I can go through, and if they're usually bullet points and definitions, I'll cover them later. And then what happens, you find all of a sudden, these sort of introductions turned out from being so cute small introductions into monstrous topics that you cannot really grasp. A problem in this is located in the teaching methodology itself, and another problem in this is located into teachers are not telling students the importance of introductions, and they're not going back and forth showing how every added layer is related to the very beginning. You understand? They go through this sort of accumulation and they put back the introductions. So students became settled with the notion that introductions are just something to leave behind. You know, and the main problem, the main issue at hand is the perceptual addition of or iteration of knowledge that I'm getting. You know, introductions is just something that we kind of, you know, to kickstart. It's almost like ice breaking, you know, and we're just instead of ice breaking through activities and, you know, running around the chairs and doing things like we used to do in kindergarten, instead we talk about terms and definitions and what this course is all about and the definition of sociology is and the ology in anything it means so and so, things like that. Yeah.
Actually, it's one of the mistakes that I'm doing when I read any book. When I have an introduction to any book, it's not important. It's not about the. Let's go to the exact.
So you skip the introduction. See, yes, I mean this sort of mindset is becoming overwhelming. We don't want to do introductions, and I know I will be stretching this, but it does relate. Remember last time when I'm talking about education, how it's becoming like fast food consumption? Yeah. See, I mean, fast food, you don't have appetizers in fast food, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't kind of prepare yourself. I mean, you go all of a sudden from no food into a Whopper or a double burger, whatever. Huh? Yes, it's different. I mean, but when you go to a restaurant, yeah, there's some kind of practice in the beginning. So you go with a salad or something or a soup, and then, I mean, things in America would be different,
I have something related to
yes.
cooking as well. I was going to a cooking academy for a year and a half, and I skipped the introductions because I had work and I couldn't attend them. And when I went to the exam by the end of the year, I was shaken up. I couldn't do anything, and I had to spend the same year again absorbing each single word said in the introductions. So it's really perfect. The introduction is everything, but people think that it's boring.
Yes, very true. I remember when I used to be in the shooting club. Shooting club is Nadi Slid. Here, the Egyptians would know what I'm talking about. In Doki.
Yeah.
Yes, and I used to play for the soccer team, the team of the club. But before that, I used to go to a school, you know, a soccer school. And I remember the very first 3 months, we used to, and I was about 11 years old. I mean, so I'm not like 3, 4, I'm 11. So I mean, approaching teenage life, and they would give us a ball, and all they would ask from us is to dribble the ball around the field, back and forth, looking up. All right, looking up. That while you dribble, don't look at the ball, look up. You have to see the field. You have to see the players next to you. You have to see your way. And at some point, I didn't care. You know, I wanted to be like the players that I see on television. So I would care more about, you know, all the maneuvers that players do. And I jumped this point of looking up. And then when we started playing games, you know, like meaty matches between the teams, I would find myself always running with the ball, not seeing anybody else. You know, every time I need to pass, I look up so the ball is taken from me. See? And why? Because the introduction I didn't really care about. It's the same thing. I mean, she probably missed all of the things, how to hold the knife in the perfect manner and how to do things and things like that. The very first grips of holding things. It's just like how you were like a baby. It takes you a few times to know how to hold a cup. And they have cups for every certain age has the design that matches, and we keep paying for things and so forth, but it's okay. But the thing is, Anas, where is Anas? Anas, he's not here today. All right, the father of Khadija, Abu Khadija, is not here. So the thing is, kids in the beginning, they try to grasp things a couple of times, and then once you show them how they hold a cup, and they do certain mistakes in the beginning, but once they're done, every single context that would require the hold of a cup, they would hold the cup. I mean, do you see the baby holding the cup at home, but when they go out, they don't hold the cup? It's the same thing, right? If they learn something, they put it in different contexts. And this is the importance of introductions. You get these the skills of the very beginning, and you apply them in every single unit that you're going through. Okay? Alright, let me go through. So he mentioned this table of contents. The first chapter on the nature and merit of knowledge and learning. The second on the purpose of study. We went through last time the relationships between these sort of chapters up until chapter 6. On the choosing of the subject matter of learning. The teachers, one's fellow students, and one's permanent affiliation. I will only mention one thing here. Back then, to a great extent, it was up to the student to decide what kind of specialization he or she would want. However, what kind of book they would study when they engage themselves into that realm is not up to them. It's up to the teacher. Alright. And we'll talk more in depth about this later on. But just note how he said on the choosing of the subject matter of learning, and he did not say on choosing of the book. And these people, when they mention things, they do mean it. All right? Yes.
Okay. I was like, trying to create an initiative about creating maps for the aspects of knowledge. Like if I want to learn something here in Egypt, for example, I dig for different books and I go to a tutor and I ask him, okay, give me your recommendations, and until I get to a trusted person. So, I don't know if is it possible or is it right or wrong to create a map for each science and say that this is the entry level and this is for the intermediate and this is for advanced people who are going to learn this. Does it help?
So you're trying yourself to do this sort of categorization?
I was trying to let people read, but to start with a very advanced level, it will shut you down. You need to start with the entry level in the thing that you're interested in.
Well, theoretically speaking, you're correct. The idea is, I mean, you have different entry-level books. Which one would you choose, and which one would you choose for that kind of person? See, just one moment. They had the same problem back then, not in standardized tests. You know the standardized tests? All of us were, let's say 20 students here in Egypt, 70 students in the same classroom. All right? And the 70 students will get the same exact test. All right? This is what we call standardized test. All right? There's this kind of upheaval in the West now regarding standardized tests. Many voices are coming up refusing this notion of standardized tests. It's hindering children's abilities.
Yeah.
And it's to a large extent it's unfair. This problem they did not have it 800 years ago. They had a different kind, which was, should we have a standardized text, not test, right? Yeah. For people to study or not? You understand?
Yes.
So the problem, they never, ever had standardized tests, ever. Until the beginning of the last century. Al-Azhar, before the beginning of the last century, never had something called standardized tests. There was no test that was distributed to students. Write down your name and your teacher and the date. And you have 1 hour and a half, and I'll write the timing on the board. And once time is up, please turn your sheet upside down and leave your pens and pencils. That kind of attitude was not there. You would use these kind of polls, and professors or shuyukh or lecturers would sit next to the poll and have few students around him, and he's coaching everyone. All right, and he would group them like 3, 4, 5, or 10 with a certain book, and they are beginners. And then another lesson with a different group of beginners, but in a different book. You understand? And each book would... Yes?
So it has to be according to the group, according to studying the need of the students. Not providing it.
Two things. One part related to the student, and that's why they mentioned that the teacher should have a foundation in psychology. I mean, usually what we do, and this is what is mentioned in this book, for example, teachers should have an understanding in طباع النفوس, the natures of the souls. Okay? And this is their psychology, their 800 years ago psychology. You understand? He should understand characters and how people behave, and the indications of these things on spirituality and on morality and so forth. And they said a teacher should have two things: a strong foundation in the knowledge that he is teaching, and a solid understanding of nature of human beings. You understand?
Yes.
One part to manage the classroom, the circle, the learning circle. And note, they did not have classrooms. Standardized tests are coming with what? With classrooms full of rows and chairs, just like the armies, right? Ken Robinson talks about this. Schools are just being run like military camps. You know, and you have the ring in the morning, and people here in Egypt, what we do and even in America in some places, many places. All right, we pledge allegiance to the flag of Egypt, and we sing the national anthem, and then we hear the bell ringing, and we walk into this sort of military, steps. And we, each one of us, go to his own location, all right? And teachers would come, would tell us what to do, and then we have a break time, and all of us start running and eating, and this is break time to us. It's about eating, which is very similar in the military as well. And I'm not talking about Egypt's military, I'm talking generally. This was not originated here, huh? And then you're dismissed. And even uniforms. You have uniforms, just like the military. You have uniforms. So, you have two analogies to talk about education and learning in our, these two past centuries. Either education is like the armies, and we're treating children like soldiers. Put your hands next to you and stand straight and things like that. Which sometimes is important, but not in that kind of meticulous way. That is kind of, not letting them have fun and enjoy discovering the world. You're not really discovering the world, you're teaching them how to be obedient. You understand? And this is very related, I'm sorry, finish this. And this is very related to the point of the pedagogy of the oppressed. Ferrero, I can't remember his name now. But look that book up. The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. All right, how the oppressed, or how oppressors use the educational systems to stretch their arms in controlling societies. You understand? All right, don't get tense. It's okay. We're not talking about politics. This is sociology, right? All right, so the point is, they did not have, again, getting back to your point, they didn't have this problem of standardized tests, but they had this kind of notion of, should we have a standardized book or not? And they entered in discussions sometimes, which is the appropriate book, for which level, and who should read this book and who should not. And reading books back then was very much like, like a license. Not only you have a license in teaching, but you have not a license, like a permission. You would not have the permission to be taught a certain textbook unless you go through some sort of examination. You understand? So this is another difference. They had exams in the beginning, all right? Which now, when we apply them in universities, we apply them in sort of English and math sort of exams to know your skills and which major you should fit in. Yes, sir.
It's a suggestion. Can we just make the question at the end of the course? Because we lost the main topics and time is running out.
Okay. Very well. But this is something in the middle. You made the suggestion in the middle too. I mean, so is this a paradox or not? Alright, it's a good point. Just to go through quickly, and then, because time is running out. And then number 7 on placing one's faith in God, and 8 on the time for the acquisition of knowledge. And this idea of time of acquisition would be really interesting to talk about when we reach it, on helpfulness and good advice, on the means useful to attainment of knowledge, on abstinence from evil, and this is the part about morality in knowledge, and this is something very interesting, that they talk about ethics in knowledge, and they don't see ethics as a different realm from knowledge. It's not something separate. I mean, when you talk now about how institutions, they require a certain code of conduct, a certain ethical code for teachers and students to maintain within that learning environment. So they had something very similar to this. Sometimes it extends from outside the learning environment to the society or the community that they're living in, not only the school that they're attending at. And then what creates memory and what brings forgetfulness. And this is something also, again, according to their scientific discoveries or general information that they had. And the 13th, which things bring about and which prevent earning a livelihood, and which things augment or diminish the years of one's life. He ends the book by talking about how to take advantage of your life. You know, you have a certain lifespan and how you can make use of this. See, the point about using time, the point about morality and ethics, the point about how to take advantage of your lifespan, what he's trying to do is to put learning in the context of human existence, not as something mechanical. Again, they view this learning as something complex and not complicated. I wrote something 2 days ago, or yesterday on Facebook, about this. You know, there's a difference between something complicated and something complex, and something that is simple. Something that is simple is to use, let's say, a recipe to prepare a meal. It's steps. Anything that requires simple steps, 1, 2, 3, done. Something complicated is something that usually requires some sort of experiments and, equations and some sort of treatment, back and forth and trial and error. But once the problem is solved, it's solved forever. You understand? Like, for example, launching a rocket to the moon. In the beginning, people did not reach that goal, but then they were able to do so. You understand? So once they grasp the realm of it, or the reality of this, or the steps to solve this problem, it's done. Yes, they might have problems, but in the end of the day, rockets until this very day are going up. This is complicated. And complicated problems, as I said, once solved, over. It's done. You just repeat the same procedure. And you might add some things, to expand it, to make it better, but you have a good start. This is complicated. What is complex is like raising a child. Raising a child is complex. And complex means is that the nature of this kind of problem is, or relies in the fact that it's not steady. Human beings, they're complex beings. We're always changing. Things are always coming up. So complexity is about many factors and different patterns between each interacting component. It's just like social networks. They're complex. You understand? So how things are going, every single node or every single factor in raising a child plays a role. So, for example, if the child is born in the summer, is different than the winter, right? The very first clothes that the child will wear will differ according to what kind of season that this kid was born in. And then let's say, for example, some people get this kind of depressive disorder because of winter. So you might find a parent or the two parents going through this kind of, mellow feeling because of winter, or even the community itself. Terrible weather, people are not going out. So the very first days of his life, he is at home. He's not exposed to the nature, for example. This plays a role, believe it or not, in the child rearing. A child who let's say in the beginning they give him a certain type of food. Types of food play a role. The lighting in his room or in his house play a role. How frequent the kid goes out plays a role. Every single fact of his life, every single instant of his life affects his personality. That's different from launching a rocket. It's more complicated. It's more complex than launching a rocket. You understand? Because there are too many factors that you cannot grasp. Yes.
You want to say that complex never comes to an end, right?
It's always unstable. There's no steadiness in complexities. They're always going through this evolving process, always changing, and always requiring different kind of treatment. All right. Even if we take this same example of raising a child, it varies from one parent to another, from being a single parent to having the two parents, from having separated parents to having married parents, from having happily married parents than not happy married parents. All of this, even the difference of age between them, and when did they have the child, in the very beginning of their marriage or not. Every single aspect of this, things that go far before the birth of the kid, affects him. See, this is how complex it is. Why am I mentioning this? What Al-Zarnuji is trying to do is to put learning in this realm of complexity. He doesn't see learning as launching a rocket. And of course, he doesn't see it as doing a recipe. He believes that every single thing in your life affects how you learn. Since learning, again, is not only studying, it's understanding and grasping the hidden realities in this universe. So again, it is very complex procedure. Alright? And you would see this. If you give to the fact, and you agree with the fact that we are complex beings, so any kind of behavior, especially learning, because learning is what makes us humans rather than animals. This is the very intrinsic trait that we talked about last time. So any kind of human behavior involves this kind of complexity. Alright, all of this we've been discussing in the introduction. But anyways, that's a good kickstart, huh? I hope.
Yeah, I did.
Alright, thank you. Chapter 1, he talks on the nature and merit of knowledge and learning. And he starts with a narration from the Prophet ﷺ, and we call this a hadith. Alright? A hadith, this is one. And a hadith, there are more than one. Alright? More than one narration, like a collection of them. And he starts with a narration from the Prophet ﷺ that says, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ. The quest for knowledge is incumbent upon every Muslim man and Muslim woman. And he wrote that in Arabic. طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ أو على كل رجل مسلم وامرأة مسلم. So every Muslim man and every Muslim woman. And yet in the canonical texts that gathered the narrations of this hadith never mentioned this part of a Muslim woman. When the Prophet said, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ. Alright, it's a must upon every Muslim. And this involves men and women.
Yeah.
Alright? Some people would say, oh, see, this hadith is, and I know this is a little bit technical, they would say this hadith then is false. Because there are certain words here that are mentioned in this text that were not mentioned in what has been authentically recorded in the books. The book says, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ. It's a must upon every, seeking knowledge is a must upon every Muslim.
Can I say
Yes.
a comment?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's for a rule in Arabic called التغليب, and there is في آية as for سيدنا مريم وكانت من القانتين. He didn't say, Allah doesn't say القانتات, so it's for تغليب. He meant سيدنا مريم.
Yes, what you're saying is that in language they use the masculine sort of word to include the feminine as well. But the point is that I'm trying to mention here that he narrated this hadith by its meaning. So what he did, he unfolded what was inscribed in the word Muslim. All right, to stress the point that it is upon every Muslim and Muslimah, and a Muslim man and a Muslim woman as well. You understand? And this would not make the hadith, this kind of doing, wrong. All right, because I know some people who are very strict with dealing with the hadith, like certain Salafis would say that this hadith is false. Then this hadith is false. Why? He did not say Muslim woman. Did he say Muslim woman? No, he didn't. Then this hadith is false. Well, you would have to revise in the books that discuss the technicalities of narrating a hadith that is absolutely okay with certain conditions to narrate the hadith according to the meaning of it, right? Or to reveal a certain meaning of a certain word in it. So, again, if this notion of hadith is not correct to apparent to some of us, these are the words that the Prophet ﷺ has said himself. All right, this is not the Quran. Quran is revealed to him from Jibreel alayhi salam, but the narrations, these are his own words throughout his daily life. All right. Az-Zarnuji was what kind of scholar? He was not a scholar of physics. He was not a scholar of hadith. He was a scholar of jurisprudence. So when he chose to talk about
He was a scholar of what?
Jurisprudence, of fiqh, all right, he was studying how to be a jurist or studying law. So when he talks about knowledge, he sees knowledge as what? He sees lawyers and judges and people who are into this law field. How do they see things usually? As what? As rules and as laws. So he started the text talking about what? The rule of knowledge. You understand? And this is something you would note in every single author or every single scholar when they talk about a general phenomena. You'd usually find the approach to this general phenomena coming from or having a root in their own specialization. All right? So he started with this notion of how knowledge is obligatory. All right. And then he talks about something else, that learning is not all aspects of learning are a must on every Muslim man and Muslim woman. What is really a must is what he calls the current state or the current condition, ilmul hal. All right? And for those who critiqued Az-Zarnuji, like certain professor from Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania, saying that he does not have a Sufi background like Imam al-Ghazali, for example, who's of course, much more well-versed in Sufism rather than Az-Zarnuji. But you'd find here Az-Zarnuji talking about ilmul hal, this kind of the knowledge of the current state. And Sufis, they have this kind of term or expression. They say the Sufi is the son of time, Ibnul Waqt. That what really concerns the Sufi is whatever is happening here and now. He's not worrying about the past at the current moment, and he's not worrying about the future. You're just living the moment, so to speak. There's this song called Living by a Moment. Jason Mraz, I don't know if anybody heard this song before or not. It's a very, the lyrics has many Sufi meanings in it. And so even if you don't listen to it, you can check the lyrics out. So living in the moment, this kind of living in the moment. So what he's talking about, that knowledge that is a must on every Muslim man and Muslim woman, is what is really pertaining to the current state that he's in. This is the obligation. Alright, but studying physics is not really obligatory. And even studying fiqh in a sort of academic way, jurisprudence, Islamic law, is not a must. You're not required to memorize texts in order to, in order to fulfill this obligatory task. What they're really saying is, there are certain tasks for you as a human being, as a Muslim. What you need to know is how to perform them, not how to educate people about them, not how to teach them in a certain academic form. This is not required from you. What is really required is how to live life fully according to Islam. This is what he's talking about. This is the kind of obligatory knowledge that you would need. And this is different, again, to many groups that emerged in the realm of Islamic calling or Islamic da'wah, so to speak. When they talk about knowledge, they say, oh, now you're going to be an observing Muslim. You're going to practice Islam correctly. You have to read this book, that book. You have to memorize these ahadith. You have to memorize these verses. This is not required from you. You understand? What is really required is to perform the action correctly. So you don't have to memorize the texts that show you that from them scholars were able to infer the rulings about how to perform ablution. Wudu. You understand? You don't have to memorize the texts for it. Yes.
But even the present is built on the past.
Yes, but I'll come to this in a second. So the point is, you don't have to memorize these texts at all. What you need to do is somebody to show you how to perform wudu. This is all what is needed. You understand? And if you don't memorize a book, and you don't memorize the hadith, and you don't know which scholar said what, this is not obligatory on lay people, on lay men. This is not something that is asked from the general public. What is really asked from you is just to perform correctly. That's all. And actually be much more involved in the worship itself, or in the task itself that you're doing currently, more than the intricate scientific differences in it. You understand? And coming to your question, when they talk about the past, they don't see that. They mean not to live the past, like waste the current time thinking about the past. But if you reflect, as long as the past has an extension to the current state, you understand? Not dreading something. You understand me?
So they don't go straight to the past, just go, like get the point that serves the present, right?
Exactly. They don't waste the current for the past. They utilize whatever happened in the past for the current state again. So this kind of flow coming from the past to this present moment. I should not be leaving this present moment and thinking about the past. And what you find many people when they do this, they're wasting, they're not fixing the past because it's past. And they're not building the future either. And then they're just stuck in the middle. Worrying about the future and dreading the past. And what happens to the present? It's becoming a dreaded past. You're just shredding it. You're not using it. You understand? This is a sort of living in the now kind of talk.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Last point before we stop for questions. All right. He says this. If you count 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, five lines. If I'm looking correctly, the sentence starts by saying, "For whatever leads to ascertaining of duty is itself duty, and what leads to the determining of obligation is itself obligation." All right. This is a great principle in Islamic tradition. If there is a certain task that is required, and this task has a certain procedure, this procedure becomes automatically required as well. You understand? You would not have to go through the process of rationalizing whether the procedure is an obligation or not. If the task is obligatory, and this task, or this obligatory task, has a definite or a certain procedure, I don't have to start thinking, do I have to do it this way? If this is the only way to something that is an obligation, it becomes in itself an obligation. And some of you might think, this is common sense. Why does he stress on that? See, many people, when they talk about obligations or goals, when we talk about goal management, so to speak, we usually tend to think about the goal itself and forget or treat the procedure or the steps or the plan that we're using to reach that goal. We kind of see it as something, yes, it's not the same level of importance. But what he's trying to say is, if going to that destination is obligatory, and you know that this procedure in itself will get you to that destination, to that exact destination, then it is on the same level of obligation. So when you're going through the process, you're doing the task. You get the point? For example, now you're learning how to pray. Let's say all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but after some time you became a Muslim. Alright? So somebody who came into Islam. So he does not or she does not know how to pray yet. Right? So they have some time to learn about prayer. That time they learn about prayer, they're not praying. They're learning about prayer. This is their prayer. You understand? It's the same kind of obligation. Because they would not be able to perform that obligatory prayer in the end unless they go through this phase of learning how to pray. So why do we undermine it? Why do we look down upon it? So what he's saying is, if you're studying something that is obligatory, you're to perform an obligatory action. You understand? While studying it, you are as if doing this obligation. You understand? So don't undermine the tools, the utilities, the procedure, the steps. Because what happens when we undermine, when we kind of look at it from a superior level, the obligation is the obligation. But learning something is the steps to get there. And you look at the steps as something that is, it's like a taxi. It's not really important. When you take a taxi to get to a certain destination, you're always thinking of who you're going to meet and where you're going and am I reaching on time or what. And you forget about all of these sort of things that happen, that go along when you are on your ride. Right? What he's saying, don't do this with learning. If you're learning something that is obligatory, and obligations have to be performed in a certain manner that meets the obligation, that meets the measurement, the weight of being an obligation. So put the same kind of mindset when you're going through the steps. Alright? So if something that is not an obligation, then you would put it also in the same mindset. But the thing is, always keep the goal and the methods or the steps that you're going to reach that goal, treat them as if they are the same thing. You understand? If you treat the steps to your goal the same way you treat your goal itself, the better you will perform the steps. And the better you will find the goal, the better the thing that you were expecting in the end becomes much better off than if you kind of wasted time or did not study that much and so forth. A clear example, and we're done. I mean, if your goal is to have a bachelor degree, for example, I mean, you can have a bachelor degree with a 2.5 GPA, with a 3 GPA, or a 3.5, or a 4, for example. Either get 70, 80, 90, 95, 98. I mean, some of the numbers I'm mentioning are impossible. But the point is, see, when you're going through the homeworks of the courses of the first semester of freshman year, so now this is your first year in college, and the very first homeworks of the very first courses to get a bachelor degree, and you really want to get a bachelor degree, you don't treat the homeworks like the bachelor degree. You go like, this is the homeworks, we're still in the beginning, I'm enjoying college life, and so on. And then, I mean, that kind of start makes a difference between somebody who would get that 98 or 95 or 90 and somebody else who would get something else. I mean, just use that same analogy in whatever you're doing in your life. If you treat the steps with the same kind of importance and attention, the way you treat the goal itself, the much better you will attain the goal. The attainment, the process of attainment is much more, I would say comprehensive or fulfilling. That's the word. Much more fulfilling in the end. All right. There was the concept that we'll talk about next time. He talks about learning as a collective duty, and he puts learning and education in the context of society, even though he's talking to individuals. So this is the societal aspect of this book. The book is very individualistic, the instruction of the student, the method of learning. And yet, when he talks about knowledge or academic knowledge, he sees academic knowledge as a social duty. So if you're studying in academia, you must understand that you're performing or you're taking a certain role in society. Once you do that, once you start earning, for example, a bachelor degree or some kind of certification, you're automatically putting yourself in a certain duty or role in society that requires, understanding of this collective nature of learning. All right, any questions regarding what we said? Comments also. I know, again, as I said, I'm not performing 100%. So in the beginning, I guess I feel that I wasted a little bit of time. I wasn't to the point regarding the spiritualities in the beginning. But once things, the propensity and the momentum, things were becoming better. Yeah, somebody were asking a question. Yes, sir. Mustafa.
Just testing a knowledge, and the kind of another test which is not standardized one is like testing a skill. So this is testing the knowledge versus testing the skill. So we need both sometimes. So I mean, why it's not like both of them are important in different ways. And this is one thing. The other thing is about memorizing, and the same concept is like I had. Maybe I'm wrong, I'm just confirming this, that memorizing, we were saying that, again, it's not the right way to have it, or the only way. For sure.
Did I say that?
No, I'm just...
Oh, alright, but people talk like this, alright.
It thought maybe I understood it wrong, that's why I'm clarifying, because memorizing, yeah, I understand you need to know how to do it, sometimes the memorizing skill. Just to clarify, because some people say, yeah, it's just memorization. I don't like this way. However, I think it's again both of them serve in a different way.
Okay. These are the only two questions, right? Okay. Regarding your first question about standardized tests and do we need to measure knowledge or to examine or test the level of knowledge and also the level of skill, and I guess Mustafa, right? Yes. Yeah. I know the last name too. Mustafa Musa. So now I looked at the camera. So now you're popular. All right. So Mustafa was talking about how standardized tests should we measure, or should it be a measurement for an examination for the level of knowledge, or also do we need something to measure the skill? And you wanted a clarification on this. The Islamic tradition, what they saw as a standard, they had the standards really were principles, meaning a beginner must fulfill a certain benchmark, but there is no obligation on generally speaking, on a wider scale, there was no universal understanding or a universal agreement or a consensus on when to reach the benchmark. Understand? So this is one. So they would have a benchmark that to finish the levels of being amateur and beginner, you need to reach a certain degree. So they did put the benchmark, but they did not treat the methodologies of evaluating that benchmark in the same strictness of the benchmark itself. So testing was usually according to the learning environment that they were involved in. And it would be different from one sheikh to another, and from one student even to another. And they believed that learners would have different roles. So you would find in the same circle, you would find a group leader, for example, or a student who's a leader in that group. And then you would find someone else who's great at note-taking. And you would find somebody else, and even these students who had different roles in the learning circle, which is a classroom, they had, after the lesson would be over, they would have roles with their classmates as well. So they had somebody, and this is from where the word, the teaching assistant or the mu'id, for example, or something of that sort. Mu'id comes from i'ada, repetition. So the teaching assistant, what he would do after the professor would leave, he would start summarizing again what the teacher has said, even though they're all, intermediates, for example. So the way the teacher used to evaluate the students would be based upon benchmarks, but these benchmarks would be tailored according to every set individual and would differ from one discipline to another and from one teacher to another. It was much more democratic. Yeah, you understand? I mean, things were really going, this was grassroots education. So things they had this freedom. And again, it was based on the ijaza system or issuing a license. So it was more based on the credibility of the professor, that he is credible enough to issue a statement saying that this student reached that benchmark or not, and so forth. This is regarding your first question. The second question about memorizing and is it not important or is it important? The way I see memorizing, I mean, it's twofold. One hand, memorizing is something of human nature. You cannot. I mean, any kind of educational system or learning methodology that overlooks memorization, you're kind of undermining the abilities of human beings. I mean, regardless if it's an Islamic vision or if it's a vision of, evolutionary biologists. Those who believe in evolution still believe that human beings evolved with memory skills. And they have short-term memory, long-term memory, and working memory, and all of these things. So undermining the role of memory in learning is something that is bad. But also turning memory itself, the mere recall of information, without any kind of thinking or reasoning or rational, cognitive, workout of this information. That's not that you're wasting your ability. Memory is supposed to bring whatever information you acquired through memorization or recall or repetition and practice and so forth, that it brings it to your mind for your mind to work at it. But if we don't use memory in learning, so every single time you have to think about a piece of information, you have to open a textbook. You understand? Then you're kind of handicapping the mind from being able to work its way through patterns of concepts and so forth. You understand? So, and you have this trend now where people say, instead of حافظ, مش فاهم, meaning, which is in English, you memorized but you don't understand. You have to understand but don't memorize. It's like, let's get into a fist fight. It's either this or that. Why not both? So it's very interesting. You find a textbook in the technicalities of Islamic Hadith, نزهة النظر by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, and he mentioned in the book in the very beginning that scholars, when they were writing the books of the foundations of the science of narration in Islam, they wrote these very abridged summaries. And he mentioned that these were written that way, in that sort of summarized, concise form, in order to improve understanding. So his students, and this is mentioned in the Hawashi, in the commentaries, in the glosses on that book. So they asked him, we would understand that these were summarized in order to be memorized. Because you're memorizing a few pages. You're like memorizing an outline or a table of contents. How would that help with memory? So his reply was, if you memorize it, you will understand it. Because once you reach the end, you still recall